The courtroom fell into a deathly silence, the kind that suffocates you. Just moments before, Jessica had been snickering, pointing a manicured finger at Sarah's swollen belly, whispering loud enough for the back row to hear. "Look at her. She's pathetic." Daniel, the husband who had sworn to protect that very wife, just smirked. They thought the victory was already theirs. The money, the house, the future. They thought Sarah was just a helpless, pregnant hurdle they could step over. But they didn't account for Judge Henry Patterson. He didn't bang his gavel. He didn't shout. He simply leaned forward, adjusted his spectacles, and asked Jessica one simple, chilling question. That question didn't just end the trial. It destroyed their entire lives. This is the story of how arrogance became their ultimate downfall. The rain in Seattle didn't just fall. It felt like it was trying to erase the city. For Sarah Miller, standing in the foyer of the colonial-style home on Queen Anne Hill, the weather felt like a cruel, pathetic fallacy, a cliché she didn't have the energy to appreciate. She was 8 months pregnant. Her ankles were swollen to the size of grapefruits. Her lower back throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache, and she was holding a manila envelope that weighed practically nothing, but felt heavier than the house itself. "I don't understand," Sarah whispered. Her voice was small, swallowed by the high ceilings of the house she had spent the last 5 years renovating. Daniel Miller stood by the fireplace, checking his watch. He was wearing the charcoal Tom Ford suit she had bought him for his promotion at the architecture firm last month. He looked impeccable, handsome, and entirely like a stranger. "It's not complicated, Sarah," Daniel said. His tone bored, as if explaining why he was late for dinner, not why he was ending their marriage. "I'm unhappy. I've been unhappy for a long time. This," he gestured vaguely at her stomach. "This whole situation just made it clearer. I need space. I need a life that isn't suffocated by domesticity." Domesticity. Sarah choked out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. "Daniel, we're having a daughter in 4 weeks. You wanted this. We did IVF for 2 years. "I changed my mind," he said coldly. "People change, Sarah. Grow up." The front door opened. It wasn't locked. Sarah turned, expecting a mover or a lawyer, but instead the scent hit her first, an overpowering cloud of Chanel No. 5 and something metallic like hairspray. In walked Jessica Thorne. Sarah knew her. Everyone at Daniel's firm knew Jessica. She was the 24-year-old marketing coordinator with the laugh that was a little too loud and skirts that were a little too short for corporate meetings. Sarah had even invited her to the Christmas party last year, concerned that the new girl didn't have any friends in the city. Jessica shook her umbrella off on the hardwood floors. Sarah had hand-stained herself and looked around with a proprietary smirk. "Hey, Danny," Jessica cooed, walking past Sarah as if she were a piece of furniture. She went straight to Daniel and kissed him. Not a peck on the cheek, but a slow, claiming kiss. Sarah felt the bile rise in her throat. The room spun. What is she doing here? Jessica turned, resting a hand on Daniel's chest. "I'm here to help Danny pack the important stuff. We figured you wouldn't be able to lift much. You know in your condition." Her eyes raked over Sarah's body. It wasn't a look of sympathy. It was a look of disgust. Jessica was rail-thin, wearing a tight crimson dress that highlighted everything Sarah currently wasn't. "You're leaving me for her?" Sarah asked, looking at Daniel. "Now, it's not just leaving, Sarah." Daniel sighed, finally looking her in the eye. "Jessica and I are, well, we're soulmates. She understands my vision. She inspires me. And frankly, she doesn't nag me about painting the nursery or setting up cribs. We're going to need the master suite cleared out by Friday. Jessica added, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. Danny's keeping the house. It's in his name after all. And since you haven't worked in 3 years, well, good luck finding an apartment in this market. Sarah clutched her stomach as the baby kicked a sharp reminder of the life inside her. This is a community property state, Daniel. You can't just kick me out. Daniel laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. Read the papers, Sarah. The prenup you signed, the one you didn't have a lawyer look at, because you trusted me. It has a clause about business assets. The house is owned by my LLC, not me personally. And right now, you have 0 income and a high-risk pregnancy. Who do you think the court is going to favor? The successful architect with a stable home, or the unemployed hormonal woman sleeping on her sister's couch? You wouldn't, Sarah whispered. You wouldn't try to take the baby. I want what's best for my daughter, Daniel said, adjusting his cufflinks. And right now, that looks like a stable environment with me and Jessica, not with a mother who is emotional. Jessica giggled. Don't worry, Sarah. I'll make a great stepmom. I've already picked out a new color for the nursery. That pastel yellow was just tragic. Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline, the primal instinct of a mother bear. She took a step forward. Get out of my house. Jessica's smile didn't falter. It's not your house, sweetie. It's ours. Daniel, tell her to leave, Sarah demanded, her voice shaking. Daniel picked up his briefcase. Actually, we're heading to dinner at Canlis. We have a reservation. You should probably start packing. I want the guest room clear when we get back. They walked out. Just like that. They walked out of the house Sarah had built into her home, leaving the door wide open, letting the cold, damp Seattle air rush in. Sarah stood there for a long time, the silence ringing in her ears. She looked at the divorce papers in her hand. Petitioner, Daniel James Miller. Respondent, Sarah Jean Miller. He had planned this. He had planned it all perfectly. The timing, the prenup, the humiliation. He wanted her broken. He wanted her to crawl away so he could replace her with a younger, shinier model without a backward glance. But as Sarah looked down at her stomach, where her daughter was currently doing somersaults, the tears stopped. A cold resolve settled over her, chilling her more than the wind coming through the door. They thought she was weak. They thought she was just a pregnant wife. They had no idea who they had just declared war on. Sarah closed the door and locked it. Then she picked up her phone. She didn't call her sister. She didn't call her mother. She dialed a number she had saved years ago, back when she worked as a forensic accountant, before she gave it up to support Daniel's dream. Hello, a gruff voice answered on the 3rd ring. Robert? Sarah said, her voice steady. It's Sarah Miller. I need you to find everything. Every offshore account, every hidden shell company, every receipt. Daniel just served me papers. I'm sorry, Sarah, Robert said, his tone shifting instantly to professional sharpness. When do you need it? By the court date, Sarah said, staring at the empty spot where Daniel had stood. I'm going to burn his world down, and I need the matches. The next 3 weeks were a blur of nausea, legal jargon, and sleepless nights. Sarah had moved into a small, damp studio apartment in Capitol Hill, all she could afford, with the meager allowance Daniel had graciously released from their joint account before freezing it. Every time she tried to negotiate, Daniel's lawyer, a shark named Arthur Sterling, stonewalled her. Mr. Miller is offering a generous settlement of $5,000. Sterling had sneered over the phone. Take it, or we go to trial and argue full custody based on your mental instability. They were gaslighting her. They were painting a picture of Sarah as a hysterical, incompetent woman who couldn't take care of herself, let alone a child. And Jessica was helping hold the brush. Jessica had been posting on Instagram incessantly. Photos of her and Daniel in Sarah's kitchen, photos of the new nursery, now painted a garish, hot pink photos of family dates, with captions like new beginnings and upgrade. She even tagged Sarah in a post about losing the baby weight, featuring a gym selfie. It was psychological warfare. 2 days before the preliminary hearing, Sarah met with her attorney, a woman named Linda Zhao. Linda was affordable, which was to say cheap, but she had fire in her eyes. It's not looking good, Sarah, Linda admitted, sifting through the stack of documents Daniel's team had sent over. The prenup is ironclad regarding the real estate. The house is technically a business asset of Miller Architrave LLC. Since you're not a shareholder, you have no claim. I designed the interior, Sarah argued, rubbing her temples. I managed the contractors. I did the accounting for the firm for the first 2 years for free. Unless we have a paper trail proving that labor was in exchange for equity, it's considered a gift between spouses. Linda sighed. And regarding custody, they have affidavits from 3 of Daniel's employees claiming you came to the office and screamed at everyone. They're painting you as volatile. I never screamed, Sarah protested. I went there once to bring him lunch and found Jessica sitting on his lap. I cried. I didn't scream. It's he. She said, Linda said gently. And right now, he has the money and the status. Judge Patterson is old school. He respects financial stability. Daniel looks like the provider. You look distressed. Sarah felt the panic rising again. So that's it. I lose my child because he cheated. We need leverage, Linda said. Real leverage. Did your friend find anything? Sarah shook her head. Robert is digging, but Daniel is careful. He's been moving money around for months, maybe years. It's a maze. Just then Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Be at Starbucks on Pike and first in 20 minutes. Alone. I know about Cabo. Sarah frowned. Cabo Daniel had gone to Cabo for a conference 6 months ago. She hadn't gone because her doctor advised against flying in the first trimester. She showed the text to Linda. Do I go? Linda hesitated. It could be a trap, or it could be the break we need. Go. But record everything. Sarah waddled into the busy coffee shop 20 minutes later. The smell of roasted beans made her stomach turn slightly, but she pushed through. In the back corner, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, sat a man she recognized vaguely. It was Marcus, Daniel's younger brother. The black sheep of the family, who Daniel constantly belittled for working as a mechanic instead of going to college. Marcus, Sarah asked, sitting down heavily. He lowered his sunglasses. He looked tired. Hey, Sarah. You look about ready to pop. Thanks, she said dryly. What is this about? I hate what he's doing to you, Marcus said, keeping his voice low. Danny's always been a prick, but this leaving you high and dry with his kid. It's sick. He says he's in love with Jessica, Marcus scoffed. Love Danny loves Danny. Jessica is just the latest accessory. But that's not why I'm here. You need to know about the timeline. The timeline. Jessica didn't just start seeing him 3 months ago like they claim in the filings, Marcus said. He slid a folded piece of paper across the table. This is a flight manifest. My buddy works at the charter company Danny uses. Sarah opened it. It was a passenger list for a flight to Cabo San Lucas, dated 6 months ago. The names listed were Daniel Miller and Jessica Thorne. So they were together 6 months ago, Sarah said. It proves adultery, but in Washington that doesn't affect the division of assets much. It's a no-fault state. Keep reading, Marcus said. Look at the return flight. Sarah looked. The return flight was 5 days later. But it wasn't just Daniel and Jessica. There was a third name listed as a lap infant on a separate commercial flight that Daniel had paid for on the same day. Baby Thorne. Sarah looked up confused. Baby Thorne, Jessica, has a baby. No. Marcus shook his head. She doesn't, but her sister does. Jessica brought her sister's kid along as a cover so she could post pictures of herself being Auntie of the Year while banging my brother. But here's the kicker: Danny paid for the nanny too. Out of the joint account. Sarah's eyes widened. He used marital funds to pay for his mistress's family vacation. It gets better. Marcus leaned in. I overheard them talking at the firm's BBQ last week. Jessica was bragging about how she helped Daniel fix the books before the divorce filing. She's not just a marketing girl, Sarah. She used to work in billing at her old job. She knows how to hide expenses. She's helping him hide assets. She's the one doing it, Marcus confirmed. Danny is arrogant, but he's lazy with numbers. Jessica is the one who created the shell companies. And since she's not his wife yet, she can't be compelled to testify against him regarding spousal privilege, or so they think. Sarah's mind raced. If Jessica was actively involved in the fraud, she wasn't just a bystander. She was a co-conspirator. Why are you telling me this? Sarah asked. Because Marcus stood up, pulling his hood back over his head. Danny owes me 20 grand he forgot to pay me for fixing his vintage Porsche, and because you were the only one in that family who ever treated me like a human being. Nail him, Sarah. He walked away, leaving Sarah with the flight manifest and a new spark of hope. It wasn't enough to win yet, but it was a start. As she walked out into the drizzle, her phone buzzed again. A notification from Instagram. Jessica had gone live. Sarah clicked it against her better judgment. Jessica was sitting in Sarah's living room, holding a glass of wine. So excited for court on Tuesday, Jessica chirped to her followers. Finally going to get the toxic people out of our lives. It's crazy how some women try to use a pregnancy to trap a man, right? Like have some dignity. She laughed, and Daniel's voice could be heard in the background. Babe, where's my grey tie? Coming handsome. Jessica winked at the camera. Wish us luck, guys. Not that we need it. The truth always wins. Sarah stared at the screen, her knuckles white. You're right, Jessica. Sarah whispered to the cold screen. The truth always wins. And I'm going to make sure the judge hears all of it. She called Linda. I have something, and I need you to subpoena Jessica Thorne as a hostile witness. On what grounds? Linda asked. Financial fraud, Sarah said, and tell Robert to look for transfers made to a J. Thorne Consulting. I think I know where our money went. The stage was set. The players were in motion. But Sarah had no idea that the real drama wouldn't happen in the paperwork. It would happen in the courtroom, with a mockery that would go one step too far. The King County Courthouse stood like a grey fortress against the slate sky, a monolith of stone and judgment. For most, it was a place of civic duty or traffic tickets. For Sarah, staring up at the imposing columns while clutching the hem of her maternity coat, it felt like the mouth of a beast waiting to swallow her whole. The elevator ride up to the 4th floor was stifling. The air smelled of stale coffee, wet wool, and anxiety. Sarah stood in the back corner, her hands resting protectively on her belly. Linda Zhao, her attorney, stood beside her, reviewing notes on a yellow legal pad with a ferocity that was both comforting and terrifying. "Remember," Linda murmured without looking up. "Daniel's team is going to try to provoke you. They want tears. They want outbursts. They want to show the judge a hormonal wreck. Do not give it to them. You are a statue. You are a queen. You are ice." "I'm an ice sculpture about to melt," Sarah muttered, wiping a bead of sweat from her forehead. The heating in the building was cranked up too high, or maybe it was just her blood pressure. When the elevator doors dinged open, the first thing Sarah heard was that laugh. It was a high, tinkling sound, artificial and sharp, cutting through the low murmur of the hallway. Jessica was standing near the water fountain, draped in a white cashmere coat that looked dangerously expensive. She was holding a takeaway coffee cup, like a fashion accessory, leaning against the wall with one leg popped. Daniel stood next to her, looking every bit the aggrieved victim his lawyer had coached him to be. He wore a navy suit darker than usual, and a solemn expression that slipped the moment he saw Jessica whisper something in his ear. He smirked a quick flash of teeth before smoothing his features back into a mask of stoicism. "Showtime," Linda whispered. They walked past the couple. Sarah tried to keep her eyes forward, but she felt Jessica's gaze like a physical touch, cold and slimy. "Love the tent, Sarah," Jessica whispered as they passed. "Is that from the camping section?" Sarah stumbled slightly. The insult was juvenile, stupid even, but in her vulnerable state it felt like a slap. She gripped Linda's arm to steady herself. "Ignore her," Linda hissed. "She's baiting you." Inside courtroom 4. B. The atmosphere was heavy. The wood paneling was dark, absorbing the light. The gallery was mostly empty, save for a few bored-looking law students, and to Sarah's horror, 2 of Jessica's friends from the marketing department. They were sitting in the back row, whispering and giggling, treating the dissolution of Sarah's marriage like a matinee showing of a reality TV show. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Henry Patterson entered. He was a man who looked like he had been carved out of the very oak of the bench he sat behind. He had bushy grey eyebrows, wire-rimmed spectacles that sat low on his nose, and a reputation for having absolutely zero tolerance for nonsense. He didn't look at the lawyers. He looked at the files in front of him, flipping pages with a methodical snap, snap, snap. "Case number 49,201, Judge Patterson grumbled. "Miller versus Miller. Dissolution of marriage, division of assets, and custody determination. Let's get on with it." Arthur Sterling. Daniel's lawyer stood up first. He was a man who wore pinstripes and exuded the smell of expensive cologne and moral flexibility. "Your Honor," Sterling began, his voice smooth as oil, "we are here today because my client, Mr. Miller, has been trapped in a loveless and increasingly volatile marriage. While he is willing to provide reasonable support, we are contesting the division of the business assets and, most importantly, custody of the unborn child." Sterling walked towards the bench, gesturing dramatically at Sarah. "The respondent, Mrs. Miller, has a documented history of emotional instability." Sterling lied, not blinking an eye. "Since the separation, she has harassed my client at his place of work. She has sent threatening messages. She is currently unemployed, living in a studio apartment, unsuitable for an infant. And frankly, Your Honor, my client fears for the safety of his child in her care." Sarah gasped softly. Linda squeezed her hand under the table. "Ice," Sarah reminded herself. Be ice. Mr. Miller, Sterling continued, is a pillar of the community, a successful architect. He has a stable home, the family home, where the nursery is already prepared. He has the means to provide nannies, health care, and education. He is in a stable, loving relationship with Ms. Jessica, who is prepared to step into a step-parent role immediately. Jessica, sitting in the front row behind Daniel, beamed. She gave a little wave to the judge, who didn't even look up. Ms. Zhao, the judge asked, turning his gaze to Sarah's table. Linda stood up. She didn't have Sterling's theatrics, but she had a quiet intensity. Your Honor, the volatility Mr. Sterling describes is the reaction of a woman who was abandoned by her husband 8 months into a difficult pregnancy. The harassment was a single visit to bring her husband lunch, and the unsuitability of her current housing is a direct result of Mr. Miller freezing their joint assets and forcing her out of the marital home. Linda picked up a piece of paper. Furthermore, we intend to prove that the business assets Mr. Miller claims are separate were built on the back of Mrs. Miller's unpaid labor and marital funds. And regarding the stable relationship with Ms. Jessica, we have reason to believe it began long before the filing date and involves the misappropriation of marital funds. Sterling shot up. Objection. Relevance, Washington, is a no-fault state. It goes to the character of the petitioner and the dissipation of assets, Your Honor, Linda countered. Judge Patterson peered over his glasses. I'll allow it, but tread carefully, Ms. Zhao. I don't care about who slept with whom. I care about the money and the child. Call your first witness. The morning dragged on. Sterling called Daniel to the stand. Daniel played the part of the suffering saint perfectly. He spoke about how hard he worked, how he just wanted peace, how Sarah had become irrational due to the hormones. She throws things, Daniel said, looking sadly at his hands. She screams at me for no reason. I'm just worried she might drop the baby or something. By accident, of course. It was a lie. A bold, disgusting lie. Sarah felt hot tears prickling her eyes. She looked at Jessica in the gallery. Jessica was mouthing the word crazy to her friends in the back, twirling a lock of blonde hair around her finger. When it was Linda's turn to cross-examine Daniel, she went for the throat. Mr. Miller, you claim to be worried about finances, yet you took a trip to Cabo San Lucas 6 months ago. Did you not? Daniel stiffened. That was a business trip. A business trip with Miss Jessica, Linda asked. She is a colleague. She attended for work. And did the firm pay for the nanny listed on the flight manifest for a baby Thorn? Linda held up the paper Marcus, no Daniel's brother, had given them. Daniel blinked his composure, cracking for a microsecond. I don't recall the specifics of the accounting. You don't recall? Linda pressed. Interesting, since you claim to be the sole financial provider who manages all the money. Objection, Sterling barked. Argumentative. Sustained, the judge muttered, though he made a note on his pad. As the lunch recess was called, Sarah felt exhausted. Her back was screaming in pain. She needed to use the restroom desperately. She waddled toward the women's bathroom near the elevators. As she pushed the door open, she prayed it would be empty. It wasn't. Jessica was there, reapplying her lipstick in the mirror. She stopped when she saw Sarah capping the tube with a loud click. Well, Jessica said, turning to face her. That went well for us, didn't it? Danny looked so sad. The judge was practically eating out of his hand. Get out of my way, Jessica, Sarah said, moving toward a stall. Jessica stepped in front of her, blocking the path. The restroom was small and Jessica's perfume was suffocating. You know, Jessica said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You should just give up. Really. Danny doesn't want you. The baby, well, Danny says he'll hire a wet nurse so we don't even have to deal with you for feeding. We're going to be a real family. You're just the incubator. Sarah felt a red-hot flash of rage. You are delusional. You think he won't do the same to you. You're just the next victim, Jessica. Jessica laughed, stepping closer. She reached out and poked Sarah's stomach. It wasn't a gentle touch. It was a prod. Oops, Jessica giggled. Did I wake the little bastard? Sarah slapped her hand away. Don't you touch me. Jessica's eyes narrowed. Or what? You'll tell the judge. Go ahead. Tell him. I'll just say you attacked me. Who are they going to believe, the glowing, successful stepmom-to-be or the fat, jealous ex-wife? She leaned in close, her breath hot on Sarah's ear. I'm going to take your house. I'm going to take your husband. And eventually, I'm going to take your daughter and call her my daughter. And there is nothing you can do about it. Jessica spun on her heel and walked out, leaving Sarah shaking against the cold tile wall, clutching her belly, gasping for air. When the court reconvened at 1:30 p.m., the air in the room had shifted. It was sharper, more dangerous. Sarah had returned from the break, pale and silent, her jaw set so hard, Linda was worried she might crack a tooth. Did something happen? Linda whispered. Put her on the stand, Sarah said, her voice devoid of emotion. I don't care about the risk. Put Jessica on the stand. Linda looked at Sarah, saw the absolute devastation and fury in her eyes, and nodded. Your Honor, Linda addressed the bench. We call Jessica, Ms. Jessica, to the stand. There was a murmur in the courtroom. Jessica looked surprised, then delighted. She stood up, smoothing her skirt, and walked to the witness box, as if it were a runway. She took the oath with a smile that suggested she found the concept of truth adorable but optional. State your name for the record, the bailiff said. Jessica, just Jessica. I'm in the process of changing my last name, she said with a wink at Daniel. Daniel offered a tight, nervous smile in return. Linda approached the stand. She held the financial documents Sarah had retrieved from her friend Robert, the forensic accountant. They weren't complete, but they showed patterns. Miss Jessica, Linda began. You are currently employed as a marketing coordinator at Miller Architrave. Correct. Yes, Jessica said, crossing her legs. And your salary is about $60,000 a year. I see, Linda nodded. And can you explain how, on a salary of $60,000, you were able to deposit checks totaling $150,000 into an account under the name J Consulting over the last 6 months? The room went silent. Daniel's head snapped up. Sterling started to rise, but hesitated. Jessica didn't flinch. I do freelance work, consulting, for various clients. Is one of those clients Mr. Miller? Linda asked. I help him with branding, Jessica said, her eyes darting to Daniel. Branding, Linda repeated. And does this branding work involve transferring funds from the Miller Joint Savings Account into your personal offshore holding in the Cayman Islands? Objection, Sterling shouted, leaping to his feet. Counsel is testifying. There is no proof of any offshore account. I have the transfer receipts right here, Your Honor, Linda said, waving the papers. Transfers made from the business account to J Consulting, which then routed to an account in the Caymans. The IP address for the transfers matches the computer at Ms. Jessica's desk. The judge leaned forward. Let me see those. The bailiff took the papers and handed them up. Judge Patterson put on a second pair of glasses over his first pair. The silence stretched for an agonizing minute. Jessica shifted in her seat. The smugness was starting to crack just a hairline fracture. "These look like standard invoices," the judge grumbled, "but the amounts are significant." "Ms. Jessica," Linda continued, sensing blood. "Did you or did you not advise Mr. Miller to hide assets in anticipation of this divorce?" Jessica let out a sharp laugh. "That's ridiculous. Danny doesn't need my advice. He's a genius. A genius who needed his mistress to set up shell companies." "I am not a mistress," Jessica snapped, her voice rising an octave. "I am his partner. We are soulmates." Sarah was just dragging him down with her. Her neediness. She couldn't even keep a house clean, let alone run a business. "Ms. Jessica," Judge Patterson warned. "Stick to the question." "But it's true," Jessica exclaimed, turning to the judge, her eyes wide and manic. "She's pathetic. You should have seen her at the house, begging, crying. It was embarrassing. Danny deserves someone who matches his level, someone who isn't fat and lazy." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Even Sterling looked horrified. He put a hand over his face. Sarah sat perfectly still, her hands on her stomach. "Ms. Jessica," Linda said quietly, "are you aware that mocking a pregnant woman in open court doesn't help your credibility regarding your fitness to be around a child?" Jessica scoffed. "Oh, please. The kid isn't even born yet. And when it is, it'll be better off with us. We have money. We have style. What does she have? A studio apartment that smells like mildew." She looked directly at Sarah then. The mask was fully off. "You know, Sarah, you should thank me. I'm taking the burden off you. You clearly can't handle it." "That is enough." Judge Patterson's voice boomed like a cannon shot. Jessica jumped, looking at the judge as if she had forgotten he was there. "You are in a court of law, young woman," Patterson growled. "Not a high school cafeteria. You will show respect to the parties involved." Jessica rolled her eyes. She actually rolled her eyes at a superior court judge. "Whatever," she muttered under her breath, loud enough for the microphone to catch. "It's just a formality. We all know who's winning here." Sterling looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. He stood up. "Your Honor, I'd like to request a brief recess to confer with the witness." "Denied," Patterson said, his eyes locked on Jessica. "I'm interested in hearing more of Ms. Jessica's perspective. It's been very illuminating." The judge turned his gaze to Daniel. Daniel was pale, sweating profusely. He was trying to signal Jessica to shut up, making a zipping motion across his mouth. But Jessica wasn't looking at Daniel. She was looking at Sarah, a cruel little smile playing on her lips. She felt invincible. She thought because she had the man and the money, the rules didn't apply to her. "Ms. Zhao," the judge said, "do you have further questions?" "Just one, Your Honor," Linda said. She walked back to her table and picked up a tablet. "I have a video sent to me 10 minutes ago by a former employee of Mr. Miller. It was taken at the office Christmas party last year. I'd like to submit it into evidence." "What video?" Sterling demanded. "It's a video of Ms. Jessica and Mr. Miller," Linda said, "discussing the Sarah problem and how to liquidate the assets before the baby arrived." Jessica froze. Daniel stood up. "That's private conversation. You can't use that." "If it was in a public setting like an office party, there is no expectation of privacy," Linda stated calmly. "Play it," the judge ordered. The bailiff connected the tablet to the courtroom monitor. The screen flickered to life. It was grainy shot on a phone, but the audio was crisp. It showed Daniel and Jessica in a corner holding champagne flutes. Video, Daniel. "It's going to be messy. She's going to want the house." Video. Jessica. "Just transfer the deed to the LLC, Danny. Backdate it. I know a notary who owes me a favor. We can say it was done 2 years ago. She won't know the difference. She's too busy knitting booties to look at the books. Video. Daniel. You sure that's fraud, Jess? Video Jessica. It's only fraud if you get caught. Besides, who's going to believe her? She's a nobody. We'll crush her in court. I'll make sure she looks like a psycho. By the time we're done, she'll be lucky if she gets visitation. Video. Jessica laughs that same cruel, tinkling laugh and clinks her glass against his. To the upgrade. The video ended. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb having gone off with the dust settling. Sarah looked at Daniel. He had slumped into his chair, head in his hands. Jessica, however, was still standing. She looked at the screen, then at the judge, and shrugged. "So what?" she said, her voice shrill. "It was a joke. We were drunk. You can't prove we actually did it." Judge Patterson slowly took off his glasses. He placed them on the bench. He looked at Jessica with an expression that was no longer angry. It was something far worse. It was disappointed. And it was final. He leaned forward, clasping his hands together. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He looked directly at Jessica. "Ms. Jessica," the judge said softly, "I have listened to your testimony. I have watched your behavior, and I have seen this video." He paused, letting the weight of his authority fill the room. "And now I have just one question for you." Jessica lifted her chin defiantly. "What?" The judge's eyes were like flint. "Did you really think," he asked, his voice low and dangerous, "that you could come into my courtroom, mock the judicial process, admit to conspiracy to commit fraud on tape, and then walk out of here with anything other than handcuffs on your wrists?" Jessica's mouth fell open. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a ghost. She stammered. "Bailiff," Judge Patterson said, his voice returning to a boom. "Take Ms. Jessica into custody for contempt of court, and while you're at it, call the district attorney's office. I believe we have a confession to felony fraud and perjury." "What?" Jessica shrieked as the bailiff moved towards her. "No, Danny, do something." Daniel didn't move. He didn't look up. He knew it was over. "And Mr. Miller." The judge turned his gaze to the husband. "Don't get comfortable. We're just getting started with you." As the bailiff grabbed Jessica's arm, she began to scream. It wasn't a laugh anymore. It was the sound of a carefully constructed reality shattering into a million pieces. Sarah watched as the woman who had tormented her, the woman who had tried to steal her life, was dragged out of the courtroom, kicking and screaming in her expensive white coat. She looked at Linda. Linda smiled a small, tired, victorious smile. "I told you," Linda whispered. "The truth wins." But the story wasn't over. The fallout was just beginning. The heavy oak doors of courtroom 4B slammed shut behind the bailiff, dragging a hysterical Jessica away. But the echo of her shrieks seemed to linger in the air like a foul scent. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the silence of a tomb, and Daniel Miller was the corpse sitting in the center of it. Judge Patterson didn't speak immediately. He took a handkerchief from his robe, cleaned his glasses meticulously, and placed them back on his nose. He looked at Daniel with a gaze that wasn't just disappointed, it was surgical. He was dissecting the man in front of him layer by arrogant layer. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, finally his voice dangerously calm. "I assume you are rethinking your strategy regarding the instability of Mrs. Miller." Arthur Sterling was pale. He was a shark who had just realized he was swimming in a volcano. He stood up, wiping sweat from his upper lip. Your Honor, in light of recent revelations, my client would like to— Your client, Judge Patterson interrupted, is going to sit there and listen, because I am not done. The judge turned his attention to Sarah. For the first time all day, his expression softened. Mrs. Miller, I apologize that you had to endure that display. The court takes allegations of fraud very seriously. But before I hand this over to the criminal division, I have a few rulings to make regarding the family matter. Sarah nodded, her hands trembling on her belly. Thank you, Your Honor. First, the judge announced, his voice booming again, the prenuptial agreement is hereby declared null and void under the doctrine of unconscionability and fraudulent inducement. You cannot sign a contract with a man who is actively hiding the assets that contract is supposed to protect. Daniel made a choking sound. Your Honor, the firm, the LLC. Sit down, Patterson barked. I'm piercing the corporate veil, Mr. Miller. It is clear that Miller Architrave LLC is nothing more than an alter ego for yourself used to defraud your spouse. Therefore, all assets held by the LLC, including the marital home on Queen Anne Hill, are now considered community property. He scribbled furiously on his docket. I am awarding Mrs. Miller exclusive possession of the marital home, effective immediately. Mr. Miller, you have 24 hours to vacate the premises. You will take only your personal clothing and toiletries. Any furniture, artwork, or assets removed will be considered theft. But where will I go? Daniel stammered, looking around as if expecting sympathy. Jessica's apartment is well, she's in jail. That is not the court's concern, Patterson said coldly. Perhaps you can sleep in your office. Oh wait, I'm also issuing a freeze on all business accounts pending a forensic audit. You won't be able to pay the rent on your office space, I imagine. The gavel came down with a finality that shook the table. Furthermore, sole legal and physical custody of the unborn child is awarded to Mrs. Miller. Mr. Miller, you will have supervised visitation rights only pending a psychological evaluation and the outcome of your impending criminal trial. We are adjourned. As the judge swept out of the room, Daniel sat frozen. The life he had built, the carefully curated image of the wealthy, successful architect, had evaporated in less than 2 hours. Sarah stood up. She felt light-headed but strong. She gathered her purse and turned to leave. Sarah, Daniel croaked. She stopped. She didn't turn around. Sarah, please, he said, his voice cracking. He sounded like a child. You can't let them do this. Prison fraud. I was just stressed. Jessica, she manipulated me. She told me it was the only way. I still love you. We can fix this. Think of the baby. Sarah slowly turned. She looked at the man she had married. He was handsome, yes? But beneath the Tom Ford suit, he was rot. You didn't think of the baby when you tried to leave us homeless, Sarah said quietly. You didn't think of the baby when you let that woman mock me. You didn't think of the baby when you stole our savings to take your mistress to Cabo. I made a mistake, Daniel pleaded, reaching for her hand. Sarah stepped back. No, Daniel, you made a choice, over and over again. And now I'm making mine. She looked him in the eye, her gaze clear and dry. My daughter will know who her father is. I won't lie to her. But she will also know that her mother was strong enough to walk away from him. She turned to Linda. Let's go. I have a house to take back. The drive to Queen Anne Hill felt surreal. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining under the streetlights. When Sarah pulled up to the house, it looked different. It didn't look like the fortress that had locked her out. It looked like hers. But there was one final twist waiting inside. As Sarah and Linda unlocked the door, Sarah had called a locksmith on the way to change the locks immediately. They found the house in chaos. Not packed, but ransacked. Drawers were pulled out. Clothes were strewn everywhere. It looked like a tornado had hit. "What in the world?" Linda muttered. They walked into the kitchen. Sitting on the island was a laptop, open and blinking. Next to it was a stack of papers and an open safe, the wall safe hidden behind the pantry painting, which only Daniel and Jessica knew the combination to. It was empty. "They cleared it out," Sarah whispered. "The cash, the emergency fund, everything." But then Sarah looked at the laptop screen. It was logged into an email account. Not Daniel's, Jessica's. It seemed Jessica, in her haste to pack earlier that week, had left her personal laptop logged in. And there on the screen was an email thread that made Sarah gasp. It was a conversation between Jessica and a man named Vinny in the Cayman Islands. Email from Jessica. "Don't worry about Daniel. He's an idiot. He thinks the money is going into his shell company. I'm routing 40% of every transfer into my private account. By the time the divorce is final, I'll have enough to leave him and move to Europe. He'll be broke and she'll be destitute. It's the perfect crime." Sarah read it twice. Then she started to laugh. It was a wild, incredulous laugh. "Linda," Sarah said, pointing at the screen. "Look." Linda read the email. Her jaw dropped. "She wasn't just helping him hide money from you. She was stealing from him." "The karma," Sarah said, wiping a tear from her eye. "It's poetic." "We need to send this to the district attorney immediately," Linda said, pulling out her phone. "This cements the fraud case against her. But it also proves Daniel was incompetent, not just malicious. It might not save him from prison, but it proves he's the biggest fool in Seattle." Just then the front door burst open. Daniel rushed in, breathless, his tie undone, looking wild-eyed. "I need my passport," he yelled, not seeing them in the kitchen at first. "Where is it? I need to leave." He ran into the kitchen and froze when he saw Sarah and Linda standing by the island. "Get out," Sarah said calmly. "You have 24 hours to take your clothes. Passports are property of the court now, Daniel. You're a flight risk." "I need to go," Daniel shouted, lunging for the counter. "She took it. Jessica took the money. I checked the accounts on my phone. It's gone. All of it. The operating capital, the savings. It's all zero." "We know," Sarah said, tapping the laptop. "She played you, Daniel. She played you for a fool." Daniel stared at the email on the screen. He read the words written by the woman he had destroyed his marriage for. "He's an idiot. I'm stealing 40%. I'll leave him." His face went grey. He slumped against the refrigerator, sliding down until he hit the floor. He put his head in his hands and began to sob. Ugly, heaving sobs of a man who realizes he has burned down his castle to build a shack on quicksand. "I have nothing," he wept. "I have absolutely nothing." Sarah looked down at him. She felt no pity. She felt no anger. She just felt done. "You have your clothes," she said, stepping over his legs to get a glass of water. "I'd suggest you pack them before the police get here. Linda called them 5 minutes ago." As if on cue, sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder, winding their way up the hill toward the house. 6 weeks later, the nursery was no longer a garish hot pink, but a calming sage green. The house finally smelled like home again, scrubbed of Jessica's cloying perfume. Sarah sat in the rocking chair, holding her daughter Maya. She had chosen the name because it meant illusion in Sanskrit, but courage in Greek, a reminder that the life she thought she had was an illusion, but the courage she found was real. The last month had been a whirlwind of justice. Daniel had been arrested that night in the kitchen after the laptop revealed everything. Now the once mighty architect was wearing an ankle monitor, living in a cheap motel and working as a line cook because no reputable firm would touch him. Jessica fared worse. Denied bail as a flight risk, the influencer was rotting in King County Jail facing charges for grand larceny and fraud. Her days of luxury were replaced by an orange jumpsuit. Sarah hadn't just survived. She had pivoted. Using the settlement funds, she launched The Truth Audit, a consultancy helping women find hidden assets in high-conflict divorces. She was already booked solid. It turned out there were a lot of Daniels in the world, and Hira was ready to burn them down. The doorbell rang. It was Marcus Daniels' brother, holding a small gift bag. "I made this," Marcus said, handing her a rough but beautiful hand-carved wooden bear. Figured she needs an uncle who can actually build things. "It's perfect," Sarah smiled, letting him in. Marcus leaned against the counter, his expression serious. "You hear about the trial. Danny's trying to plead insanity, and Jessica turned on him. She's cutting a deal to give the feds everything on his business deals to save her own skin. They're eating each other alive." "Let them," Sarah said softly, looking at the blooming roses in the garden. "They don't exist in my world anymore." Marcus looked at her with newfound respect. "I used to think you were too soft for him, Sarah." "I was soft," Sarah agreed, rocking Maya. "Like water. But water crashes through rock if you give it time. And if you try to contain it, it will drown you." After Marcus went downstairs to fix a leaky pipe, the phone rang. It was Linda. "I got the final judgment," Linda announced brightly. "The judge awarded you 100% of the marital assets. The house is yours, free and clear. And Daniel. We're garnishing his wages for the next 18 years for restitution. Every burger he flips contributes to Maya's future. It's a permanent reminder of what he threw away." Sarah hung up and walked into the living room, the same spot where Daniel had once told her he wanted a life without domesticity. "Well, Daniel," she whispered to the empty air, "you got your wish. You have no home. You have no family." She kissed Maya's forehead. "And we have everything." The storm had passed. Standing in the sunlight, Sarah realized she hadn't just survived. She had been forged. She was no longer the victim. She was the victor. 5 years had passed since the gavel fell in courtroom 4B. Seattle was uncharacteristically bright, the sun reflecting off the glass towers of the city. In a sleek office building overlooking the Sound, a frosted glass door bore the name Phoenix Financial Forensics, Sarah Miller, CEO. Sarah stood by the window sipping herbal tea. She was no longer the swollen, terrified woman clutching a manila envelope. She was leaner, radiating natural confidence in a tailored cream suit that cost more than her entire wardrobe from 5 years ago. Her firm was now the premier agency on the West Coast for uncovering hidden assets in high-stakes divorces. She had turned her trauma into a weapon for others. "Sarah," her assistant called out, "there's a man in the lobby. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's personal." Sarah walked into the lobby. Standing near the elevators, clutching a worn-out baseball cap, was a ghost. It was Daniel. He was thin, his hair graying. He wore a jacket that was 2 sizes too big. The arrogance that had once defined him had been eroded by 5 years of failure. "Sarah," he rasped, "I saw your picture in the business journal. Top 40 under 40. Congratulations." "Thank you," she replied coolly. She felt nothing. No anger, no fear. Just indifference. "What are you doing here?" "I've been looking for work," he mumbled, staring at his shoes. "Architecture firms won't hire me with the felony fraud record. I've been doing delivery driving, and I heard about Jessica." "Oh, she's on parole," Daniel spat bitterly. "Working at a nail salon in Tacoma. She tried to call me after she testified against me." "Can you believe that—" "I can," Sarah said. "You were always very similar." Daniel flinched. "I've changed, Sarah. I really have. I did my time. But I lost everything. I miss the safety we had." He took a step closer, eyes pleading. "I was wondering if I could see her. Maya. She must be 5 now. I have a right." "You have no rights." Sarah cut him off, her voice sharp. "You signed them away to avoid prison time for child endangerment after you tried to flee the state. Remember, just once," he begged. "Please." Just then the elevator doors pinged open. "Mommy?" A little girl with bouncing curls and bright eyes ran out. Maya, now 5 years old, rushed to Sarah. Behind her stepped Marcus, looking sturdy and happy. In a clean mechanic's uniform, he now owned his own shop, funded by a loan Sarah had given him. Marcus stopped when he saw Daniel. He stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Maya's shoulder. "Daniel," he growled. Daniel stared at the girl. She looked like Sarah, but she had his chin. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This was the daughter he had called a burden. Maya looked up at Sarah, then at the strange, sad man. "Mommy?" she asked, tugging Sarah's jacket. "Who is that man?" The lobby went silent. Daniel held his breath, waiting for Sarah to scream, to validate his existence with anger. Sarah smiled down at her daughter, smoothing her hair. "That's just someone I used to know a long time ago, sweetie," Sarah said softly. "Nobody important." She looked up at Daniel one last time. "Goodbye, Daniel." The sentence was worse than hate. Indifference was erasure. He had been deleted from the narrative of their lives. "Come on, Maya," Marcus said, glaring at his brother. "Let's go see Mommy's office." "Okay," Maya chirped, grabbing Marcus's hand. She didn't look back. Daniel stood frozen for a moment, a solitary, grey figure in a world of colour. Shoulders slumped, he turned and walked out into the rain that had just begun to fall. Sarah picked up Maya and walked into her office, closing the door on the past. She had grown a forest from the dirt they threw on her. She was no longer the victim. She was the victor. In the end, Daniel and Jessica learned that arrogance is a loan borrowed against a future you cannot afford. They thought Sarah's silence was weakness, but it was the gathering of a storm. They mocked a pregnant woman, thinking they were untouchable. But one question from a wise judge toppled their house of cards. True power isn't about shouting. It's about standing in the wreckage, holding your head high, and building something better. Sarah didn't just win a court case. She won her life back. She proved that while a lie travels fast, the truth eventually kicks down the door. If you enjoyed this story of justice served, please hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that the truth always wins. What would you have done? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.